to Brook Hill Spotlight. This is a program that we do weekly that gives you an opportunity to get to know someone in our congregation, learn about their story, ministries they're involved in, and different ways God has worked in their life. So today we have as a guest Craig Morgan, and so I'm excited for you to get to know Craig. And so, hi Craig, how are you doing?
Hi, Pastor Dana.
I'm glad you're here today. And so we're going to start with, if you could tell everyone, how did you end up at Brook Hill Church?
Well, first, let me make sure everyone understands I am not Craig Morgan, the famous country music singer, because I'm often confused with that guy.
Okay.
Only because of the name, not the face. But anyways, we came to Brook Hill about 32 years ago. Donna and I moved here in 1984 when we were married. And we picked Frederick because it was halfway in between. I was working in Hagerstown, she was working in Bethesda, and Frederick was kind of in between, so it was a great place. So we moved here then, and we visited a lot of churches downtown in our first couple of years, but we didn't come out to Brook Hill until, I think it was the late 80s. At that point in time, we decided we wanted something a little closer to home. We live here in Clover Hill. And, we're starting a family, so this church was a church that seemed to fit what we were looking for. There were a lot more young couples there then than there are now, unfortunately. And it was just a good fit for us.
Oh, that's great. So tell me a little bit about your family.
So I'm a Buckeye. I was born in Ohio, but I've lived in Maryland longer than anywhere else, so I feel like a Marylander. Grew up in Ohio. My father worked for General Motors, and he was transferred to a plant in Martinsburg, West Virginia, which was built in the late 60s. It's no longer there, but we moved to West Virginia in 1968, and I lived there through early 80s, I think, is when I moved to Hagerstown. And my mom ended up coming down to Homewood in her latter years, and she attended church here with us quite often. You probably do remember her. And up until she passed, she lived in Homewood, and so she was part of the Brook Hill. She would never join. She was a very staunch Presbyterian.
Okay, that's okay. We have people like that.
But she did enjoy coming here.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now tell me about your children.
So I have two kids, Alex and Sarah. Now, Alex is married to Sarah, and they have a son, Jack, and my daughter, Lauren, who's married to Eric, and they live down in Dickerson.
Okay.
Alex and Sarah and Jack, he's a Navy pilot, and he is stationed on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which was just reported to Bremerton, Washington. So when he came back from his deployment this year, the family moved to Washington State. So he is currently on the West Coast. And again, Lauren and Eric are close by. I make fun because my kids both married Midwesterners.
Okay.
Sarah is from Minnesota, and Eric is from Nebraska.
That's interesting. It's very interesting. In fact, we'll have to talk afterwards because my daughter lives in Dickerson too, so they might even be neighbors.
They could
I don't know. Well, tell me a little bit about what do you do for a living, or?
So I've been in electrical sales all of my life. I sold electrical distribution equipment for Square D Company for 38 years. They were the manufacturer of the equipment. And about 3 years ago, I took an early retirement from there. But I was only retired for about 9 months because my daughter was getting married, and my wife says, "You know how expensive weddings are. I think you should find a job."
I do.
Yeah.
Understand
And
that.
so anyways, one of the distributors that I used to work with had been after me, and so I went to work for them, Dominion Electric Supply out of Arlington, Virginia, although I'm actually associated with the Baltimore branch. And so I've been working with them for the last couple of years, and it is my intention to retire again at the end of this year if they'll let me, but they don't want me to. But we'll see.
Well, that's great. So tell me, where did you go to college? Some of those stories about that.
So we lived in West Virginia, and when I graduated from high school, I went to Hedgesville High School. My parents said, well, we'll pay for college, but only in-state tuition.
Yes.
So don't get any ideas about going anywhere expensive. So a lot of my friends were going to either WVU or to Shepherd. And WVU at that point in time seemed to me like just a little too big of a school for me. And Shepherd, I had a lot of friends going there. So as Tim Lieber told you in his spotlight, it was Shepherd College then. I beat him there by a couple years.
Okay.
So I went to Shepherd College, it's now Shepherd University. And Donna did as well.
Okay, so I do want to hear, how did you meet Donna? You've been married for how many years?
38 years.
38 years.
Interesting story there. So Donna went to Shepherd as well, as did my sister. And Donna's a couple years younger than me, as is my sister, and they had classes together, and they became friends. And so anyway, my sister actually introduced us. I jokingly said that she didn't like the girls I was dating, so she thought she'd pick one out for me, which is kind of how it worked out, I guess. So yeah, so we met in Hagerstown at the Shoney's, which is no longer there, but it used to be in front of the Valley Mall.
Yes.
With she and my sister met me there for lunch one day because I was working in Hagerstown, and that's where we met.
Well, that's interesting. I like to hear the stories about that. Well, can you tell me now a little bit about your faith story? Tell me maybe, do you remember where you first started your faith journey?
Yes, so I was baptized in the Presbyterian Church in Ohio, and we continued in the Presbyterian Church when we moved to West Virginia. I actually had a kind of an interesting experience with the church that we went to in Falling Waters. It's not there anymore, but the building's there, but the congregation isn't. Actually went through a split. Okay. And so there were many families that left the church, and there were just a few families that stayed. So my family was one of the ones that stayed. And in the Presbyterian Church, it's different than Methodist Church. If you want a pastor, you have to go find them.
Yes.
And the pastor that had been at that church went with the group that left.
Wow.
So they left as a congregation, but the building belonged to the church, so those who stayed behind got to keep the building. So anyways, at 16 years of age, I was on a committee searching for a new pastor.
That's interesting.
With a bunch of adults. I was the only younger person, but I learned a lot, and it was very interesting, and it was a very difficult task. So I actually am very thankful for the way the Methodist Church does this, because it takes a lot of stress and strain out of the congregation to have the conference figure out the right fit.
The right fit. Well, that's good. Well, tell me a little bit about where God has used you in ministry, different areas of the church you've been involved in.
So here at Brook Hill, I taught Sunday school. I've been I'm in a Sunday school class. I've been involved in that, although I've taught it a few times. Normally we have teachers. But I taught youth, the youth Sunday school. Been involved with ASP, did some trips, and my kids were very involved in ASP. I was on the church council for a couple of tours. I was on staff parish for a couple of tours. In fact, you probably recall I was here when you came.
I was thinking you were on that committee.
And currently I'm on endowment. And I'm also the head of the Children's Memorial Service, which started 37 years ago. This year will be the 37th service. Started by Jim Whitmer. And I've been chairing that for about 10 years.
So tell us more about that, because there might be people interested in being a part of that.
It's an interesting service in that it's a real outreach for Brook Hill. There are a couple of families from Brook Hill who attend who unfortunately have lost a child. But this is an outreach to the community, Frederick County, Washington County, Carroll County, local, even some people from West Virginia come. And it's really an outreach to families who have lost a child, up to the age of 21, statistically, but we actually have bent those rules a number of times, because I said, I think once you're a parent, you're always a parent.
Yes.
And if your child is 30 years old when they die, it doesn't hurt any less than if they die when they're 5.
I agree.
So, but we had to have sort of some way of trying to, keep a cutoff. So anyways, The service is really for those families who are grieving, and it's done at Christmas time, so the families can come here in a sort of a safe environment. Many people will tell us that they may have lost their child 2 weeks ago, or they may have lost them 20 years ago. The people who lost their child 2 weeks ago, people are still a little bit understanding, oh, you've had a loss. But those people who lost their child 20 years ago, society thinks they should have moved on.
Right.
And they'll tell you that, that's not the case. And they have a very difficult time, especially many of them at Christmas.
Right.
And so coming here with people like them, allow them to share their grief, share stories, give each other hugs, and just try to lift each other up. We always open the service to families who wish to speak about the child, to get up and recite a poem or tell us a story about the child. We try to make it uplifting, although it is often emotional, but we do try to make it a celebration of these kids' lives. And so we have a real nice, it's usually about an hour to an hour and a half, a real nice service. And it just, again, it's just for those families and their friends who feel like they want to come and just remember their kids.
One of the most powerful actions that happens is them receiving an ornament with their child's name, and they get to place it on the tree. And
right. First, when they first come in, if they're the first time parents, we also give them a separate ornament that they can take home with them.
Right.
But or we send it to them if that's sometimes that's the case. But yeah, they get an ornament with their child's name and date of birth and date of death on it, and they are allowed to put that on the tree themselves. And then also for those families who have been here previously but may not have returned, we have ornaments on the tree for those children as well. And in fact, you've seen how loaded that tree is at Christmas time, and there are over 500 ornaments.
I was wondering how many there were.
As of last year, I did the count on the number of children that we have honored in this service for the last 37 years, and it was 537 kids.
Wow, that's amazing and powerful.
A lot of kids.
Well, I know it's a very special time. I love the way the congregation, we come around them and sing to them. We have a reception. Just to be there.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I know many people do feel a little reluctant about the service because they know it's emotional, but there are many, many aspects of this program that don't take place within the service itself. We have the fellowship afterwards, and people can be there to just serve food, just chit chat with the folks that come in, just be supportive,
Yes.
And also we have a huge mailing that goes out every year to all these folks. And we have music, and so there's musicians involved. There's a lot of parts and pieces, moving around on this thing, and there's a lot of help required. But it's very rewarding, and the people that come are so thankful.
Yes.
And without it, every year you hear people saying how thankful they are that Brook Hill does this. And many people have been coming for 20, some 25, 30 years.
Yes.
There's just, it's a good outreach.
So if somebody knows someone that might benefit this, should they call the church office, or is there a way they can find out more?
Yeah, so at one point in time, we used to advertise in the newspaper. We haven't done that in a lot of years because we found word of mouth seems to work pretty well. Many of these people that come are in grief groups.
Yes.
With others like themselves, and they spread the word. So, and again, we do have the big mailing list, so people that have been here before, we send them an invitation every year. But for new folks, they can certainly call the office, and they can, all they have to do is reach out to Lisa, and we can send them information, on the program.
Okay.
And, hopefully they'll join us. Some people want to join us. I've seen it happen where they walk to the door and they just can't come in.
They couldn't.
And that's fine too. It just, people are in different places in their grief.
Well, but it's still wonderful. It's very wonderful that we're doing this, and I'm excited that we're doing it in person this year.
Yeah, last year was,
break.
and Don and Virginia were huge helps last year in putting this thing together. And as you recall, we did it all virtually,
Yes.
pre-recorded.
Yes.
And I was curious a couple weeks ago. I just wondered how many people actually viewed that service. Mm-hmm. So I went back and looked at the YouTube views, and there were 266. Now that's more people than we typically get in a service. We usually run 135 to 150. Right. So my guess is that either a lot of people watched it more than once, or a lot of people found it on YouTube from who knows where in the world and watched it anyways, which I find gratifying, because I was very concerned that maybe we would just not reach very many people doing it virtually, but I think it worked out okay.
Okay, well, thank you. I didn't hear you mention, but you also have been involved with the choir.
That's correct.
Yes.
Unfortunately, this year we made the decision to drop out because it is our intention to spend the winter in Florida.
That's okay, but I just thought I'd mention the music part.
But we really enjoyed our time in choir. I don't know that it's permanent, Virginia, but I know she would love for us to come back, and we do miss them. We really do miss them. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how it goes. But we knew we had a lot of things going on this fall with our son moving, and wanting to make a trip to Washington, and we knew we were going to be missing a lot of choir practices, and then we planned to try to winter in Florida. And so we do kind of hope that the virtual service continues. I know it was supposed to only go through February, but we really enjoy that, so I don't know. It would help us stay connected if the service continues to be,
and we see a need for doing that.
Yeah.
And actually have had people that have checked out our congregation just trying to find out who we are, and then came and visited. So there's a value in continuing to have that online component, besides just helping people who cannot be here in person.
Right. And the fact that we can even have new members join virtually.
Yes.
I thought that was fantastic.
Well,
this
good.
morning. I thought that was so great how that worked out.
Yeah, we worked that out, and so we're so grateful for the technology that makes these things possible.
It is wonderful. Yeah, I mean, technology can sometimes be the bane of our existence, but
it's true.
But it is really helpful, and has been through this whole pandemic.
Yeah. Well, okay. So a few more questions, and is there? First tell me about your hobbies. Any hobbies you like to do? Anything?
Well, I'm not a golfer or a fisherman or any of those kinds of things. I'm a kind of a car nut, so I read a lot about cars. I'm a history buff. I love going to, my wife hates this, but I like going to Civil War battlefields.
Okay.
So generally she won't go with me because I burned her out one weekend in Fredericksburg, where we went to literally every battlefield in sight.
So we will have to go do this together so that I can hang out with Donna, because that's what my husband does too.
Randy likes that too.
Oh, he loves that.
So yeah, I like to do the Civil War stuff. So I'm very interested in history. I would love to take a trip to Normandy and see all that. Haven't done that yet. It's kind of on my bucket list. I'm interested really in presidential history. I like to read historical biographies about past presidents and things. I kind of have a goal to go to every presidential library in the country.
Okay.
I've been to 3 so far, and there's a bunch more to hit, but I find that very informative and enjoyable. So yeah, like going to car shows and just stuff like that.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. Well, tell me, as we finish up this interview, what is important to you? What would you want people at Brook Hill to know? Maybe there's something you'd like to say about what's important to you, or what do you think?
So a couple things, I was thinking about that this morning after the service, and just thinking about how I was raised in the Presbyterian Church, and the whole concept of predestination and everything. Really didn't understand much about the concept of grace until I came to Brook Hill and the Methodist Church.
Yes.
And the whole idea of free will, and the fact that God gives us grace, prevenient grace, even though we don't realize we're getting it.
Yes.
And there are so many people out there that I don't think realize that God loves them and He's reaching out to them. They don't know it,
right,
but He's there for them. And I guess what I'd like to say is that I'd like to be a better person. I think probably everyone would say that. Mm-hmm. And I would like to be able to give the kind of grace that God gives us to other people. Mm-hmm. I know it's difficult sometimes. There are people in my life that I'm a little annoyed with right now, and I'm trying to give them grace. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes you have to work at that.
Yes, you do.
But I take a step back and say, God's given it to me.
Right.
I need to be able to give it to someone else too.
Yes, that's a good word.
Yeah.
That's a good word. I say
Yeah.
amen to that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
This has been a great time to get to know you. I found out things I didn't even know, and that's one of the fun things about the Spotlight interviews.
Yeah, these are great. I think just keep them going. It's a great way for the congregation to get to know the membership of the church.
Yes.
And everyone's got a story. So
Everyone has a good story.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining us here at Spotlight Brook Hill. We hope that you learned something more about Craig, but we also think about your own God story and the different parts of your story that might impact someone else. We would love to interview you as well. So I hope you have a good week and bless you all.